Today on Money 101 with Jane Dutton, we're talking about gender evolution in the workplace. How far are we down that road? Because when we get it right, and we must, it'll be highly beneficial for us as species and the bottom line. Helena Conradi, thank you for getting in touch with us from Cape Town. You've got some questions to ask when it comes to women in the workplace and what sort of impact they have. What are they?
So maybe just to give you a bit of background, I've worked in corporate South Africa for almost 30 years, specializing in the financial services sector the entire time. So over the years, I've been fortunate to meet wonderful women, amazing women, in different roles, different businesses, different countries even. And I would love to hear Candice's view on a few of the tough questions. Maybe first one is exactly why does diversity boost the bottom line? And then also how we can actually achieve it, because I don't think we're there at all. So we've got a long way to go. And then my final question also, what is stopping us from being effective? So thanks very much for giving me the opportunity to ask those questions.
Very quick question to you. What about the locker room mentality? How big a factor do you think that is?
It's always a factor. I think it will be in different ways. Some years it will be golf, some years it will be mountain bike, some years it will be running. There will be groups, and you will be excluded from those groups. Not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it will be there in all different facets, all over the years.
Helena, thank you very much. So I'm with Candice Paine, an independent financial planner, which these days in itself is quite something, and formerly involved in asset management. So we had something, firstly, hello.
Hi, Jane. Thanks for having me here.
We had some good pointers raised there, and let's deal with the first one, the impact that women can have on the bottom line, the impact that women in business have.
So women bring a very different angle to businesses, and businesses really need to take note because they need to be inclusive places where people want to work. So a lot of the sort of qualitative traits that they bring they focus on things like well-being, which is important in the middle of a pandemic. There's a lot of burnout. They're excellent organizers and planners. They tend to juggle many hats. They are many things to many people. They're patient. They are team players. They also tend to naturally conduct allyship, which is advocacy. They advocate for other women. They sponsor other women. They are natural mentors. This is not to say that men are not these things, but women tend to naturally be these things. They also don't tend to abuse privileges or give special favors, having been at the sort of receiving end of that. They are great mediators because they are empathic listeners. So men tend to go straight into solution modes where women seek to understand what is going on. They're also inspired leaders. They're motivated, they're hardworking. They may have worked very hard to get where they are. And millennial women are also something we need to talk about. They bring a different focus into businesses, specifically around products, processes, and customers. So all of this is bringing diversity of thinking into a workplace, and inclusivity, making people want to be there, want to belong, and want to work hard.
Do you think it is from a basic level? I mean, clearly they're not two-dimensional. Is it because they juggle so much in their personal lives, possibly a relationship, kids maybe, all of that? Does that come into play?
I think absolutely. I think women multitask very well. I think there's a complexity of thought that is going on constantly. They read the sort of nonverbal cues that people have, and they respond to them. There's a natural sort of nurturing in women. And as I say, it's not all women, and some men do this too, but there's not enough of this in workplaces currently. And so bringing it in brings a big change into a culture, into a team, and allows especially younger people in the workplace to feel like they belong.
Again, I know there are many factors, but why do you think it is so difficult for women? Is it conditioning? Is it years of experience? Do they just feel that this is my lot and I'm just going to give in and not fight for what I deserve?
There's an historical mindset. I think women also deselect themselves, and they need to kind of carry that responsibility. I think there is fatigue. They felt like they've said their lot many times and it's fallen on deaf ears. And maybe the responsibility of women there is to think about how they can raise the issues differently to make themselves heard. I think women are also hugely resourceful, so they'll find other ways of making a living. You know, they might choose to leave companies and people won't even know why they've gone. I think women need to fight harder. I think men need to listen more carefully in the workplace. I think also that historically women have been seen, you know, our biases, our perceptions, woman equals home and men equal work.
I mean, look at evolution, excuse me, butting in here, over millions of years. And it seems, if you look at it in that perspective, that we've come quite far. But if you think of the sort of conditioning over those millions of years, it's little surprise, I guess.
It is little surprise. And there's also something called homosocial reproduction, which is a mouthful. But what it means is that you like to surround yourself with people who are like you. And so traditionally, corporates have been created for men, by men. And it's that kind of thing that we need to break down and say corporates need to be made by the people, for the people. And that's all of the people. I mean, it's race, it's gender, it's kind of all of the diversity that we need to bring in so that people can feel included. And it kind of comes to the point of, is diversity the thing that we're fighting for, or is it actually inclusion? Because they're not the same thing. And there's actually a diversity specialist in the States called Vera Meyer who summed it up perfectly. I couldn't say it better. She said, diversity is your invitation to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance.
Oh, beautiful.
It's fantastic.
That makes sense, doesn't it? It's easy to possibly tick the diversity box, but actually get you involved.
Yeah, and
use you for what you're good at.
And I think it's the inclusion that keeps people engaged. You want engaged workforce. It keeps employees fighting for the company. It keeps them being productive. It keeps them being innovative. And I think in this day and age where people can choose where and how they want to work, and talent is the thing that's in short supply, companies need to wake up, you know, and make sure that their employees, all of their employees, are happy.
It's quite extreme, but possibly puts the situation in relief. I used to live in the Middle East for 13 years. I was friendly with a member of the royal family. It's not hard, it's such a big royal family. She was an Al Thani. She was top of her class. She was top of her class at university. She went for many job interviews. She didn't get any, and yet she got a salary. And after 6 months, I saw her and she said, Jane, you can't believe it, I've just had a salary increase. And that's that inclusion that you're talking about, right? And obviously the Middle East is a little bit more extreme than we are here, but it's quite a good picture of how women are seen.
And I think that the way that we need to approach getting around this is starting to talk about people's blind spots. And it really goes into an area that people are uncomfortable. You know, everybody believes they don't have blind spots. Everybody believes that they are fair. You know, they kind of tick the boxes around, well, we pay everybody the same. That's the easy stuff. It really is the sort of training around bias and sensitivity, and how you get people to understand what they may be doing that is part of the problem and is not part of the solution. So
tell me how virtual reality has stepped into this role.
So this is a fantastic story. There's a company in Australia called Equal Reality, run by a woman who had experienced this sort of discrimination in the workplace, and she has created virtual reality goggles, which she brings into this bias training, where people can actually have a visceral experience of what it is like to be discriminated against from a gender or a race perspective. And in its most sort of pedestrian form, what they've done is made, for example, men the shortest people in the room. So what does it feel like if you're short and you're trying to talk to somebody or interrupt a conversation or get your point across? You can really put yourself in someone else's shoes and feel what they're going through. And I think through that process, you can start addressing your biases and your prejudice, because that's what's stopping us from kind of working together.
Another one of the questions, how do you bring in diversity? I mean, is there a notebook that you can play off that tells you what to do? Or is it a psychological journey as well?
There is a notebook. It's legislated, you know, the rules are there, but there's got to be commitment and buy-in. And it's got to come from the top. And usually the C-suite is the least diverse place in the company. but you need buy-in there. But you also need buy-in on the sort of second and third tiers of management. And unfortunately, you are going to have to sort of performance manage and remunerate for it. You know, what you don't pay for, you don't get, or what you don't incentivize, you don't get, and what you don't measure, you won't understand. So that's kind of where it starts in its hard, cold format. But then there are other places that you need to bring it in. You know, how are you recruiting? Are there internal referral systems? Are you open to looking at sort of different skill sets for jobs that previously required, you know, sort of an accountant or that sort of thing? How are you thinking about being inclusive in your workplace? And then there's also the more subtle things. So what is the language being used in your corporate? Do you address rooms of people as, hey guys? You know, it seems
obvious,
benign, but it's not. You know, there's a subtext there. There's a subtlety there. That awful word, microaggressions. Are people, you know, is that happening in your workplace? Are people using sort of stereotypes around groups of people that might seem funny or not harmful, but they definitely kind of create the stereotypes.
And exacerbating feeling like the only woman on the outside, even when you're in the room.
Completely. You know, also who are you particularly in the workplace? Who's your circle of trust? Who are you bouncing ideas off of? Is it people like you, or are you bringing other people into that circle, you know, when you're trying to solve a problem? What does that look like? It can even go as far as your social media presence. Which voices are you amplifying or validating? Who are those people? Because all of that talks to diversity or your view on diversity. So individuals need to take responsibility and go, how am I seen from a diverse point of view? Am I promoting it, or am I stopping it in the workplace?
I mean, you see in the Forbes, this year's Fortune 500, 37 of the companies are led by female CEOs. I mean, that's quite a jump, isn't it? It's quite a difference. And you wonder what sort of impact that has had on the bottom line, what it is that they're doing that's right.
Well, I think that they are probably embracing things like innovation and embracing things like employee well-being. It's really important that your employees are happy, because if they're not, they disengage. So there have also been stats on how employees leave companies. It can take them a year or two to leave a company, and for a year or two they are not actively productive in your company. That's not a great number, and it's reflected in the JSE stats as well, where 19 women run JSE listed companies of a paltry 340. That's another whole story. Yeah. But yes, we need more women as CEOs, but we also need more women at management levels. So there's something called the broken rung, where they're just not getting into that management level, and why not? And that is a measurement and a performance thing. So part of the legislation around how are we implementing diversity is how are we promoting people, and what does succession look like in our companies. So it's great to have female CEOs, but we don't all have to be the CEO. We need to be everywhere. Mentorship, I think, is hugely important, in sponsorship. And I think that most people who come from a privileged background don't understand the power of that, because we are so well networked anyway. It's bringing people, it's making the circle bigger, but bringing people into that circle. And women do those fantastic kind of innovative things that are inclusive as well. You know, there's also Lucy Kellaway left the FT after she had a divorce, and she started a teachers academy in the UK. And what she's doing there is diverse in a different way, but she's allowing older people, retired people, professionals, you know, educated people to teach, and she's fast tracking there. And many of those people are women, you know, and that's a women-run initiative supported by women.
And just because you're older doesn't mean you've got nothing to give. You touched on divorce. I mean, that's another thing in our evolution, marriage, divorce, all of that has popped up. And I know you, as an independent financial advisor, what is your advice there for women? Again, if she suffers a divorce or goes through a divorce, often she is left with the children, if she has children. So the financial burden grows on her. How do you balance that?
With great difficulty. I mean, divorce is a traumatic event for most people, And many women still, even in 2022, are kind of left less able to meet their financial abilities. And as you say, they are become single mums, de facto single mums. So what you need to do then is skill up. If you haven't worked, you need to try and get into the workplace, which is a hugely difficult thing. And this is, again, where corporates need to look at people in different sort of home situations and how they can be brought in. But I think the advice would be, before you get divorced, I mean, people don't necessarily know when they're going to get divorced, but women need to take responsibility for their finances as well.
Community of property. What do you do?
Well, community of property is, as long as there's no debt, you benefit.
Fine.
But it's the prenups without accruals, or where you left high and dry, and you signed that contract. So it behoves you to understand, what contracts you've signed and manage for the risks. Everybody needs a margin of safety everywhere in their lives, and so at least understand what risks you are facing and try and mitigate them in some way if you can. And always having some productive outlet or being employable in some way or being able to hustle, is good for everybody.
Life risks. If you look at what's happening in the UK, something like 80,000 women a year are getting breast cancer. It's a sharp increase. How do women factor that sort of thing in your lives? How do you prepare? Because that also will take you out of the workforce for a while.
Very boring. Dread disease cover. If you can't afford any sort of risk insurance because it's expensive, the one you should focus on is dread disease. The dread disease covers come a long way, and one of the big four, strokes, cancer, heart attack, etc., is going to get us. And it's the one that we in our practice have seen pay out. So definitely, if you can afford it, don't leave it too late. The older you get, the more expensive it becomes. It's difficult, though. When you're young, you think you're bulletproof and none of this is coming your way. That's how you mitigate against that. And then obviously your health checks and that sort of thing. It's always easier to face a risk with money in the bank, or to face a traumatic event with money in the bank. I think people need to be focusing on their finances far more than they do, and that's all people, not just women. People need to be saving more than they do, and people need to understand that life is actually lurching from crisis to crisis and not so much a fairy tale as we might have been told. And boring as it is, you need to put those safety nets in place.
Are there women-specific investments?
No, they're not women-specific investments. Investments are for everybody. I think women need to apply their minds and not shy away from it. Although so saying, women are very interested in their money. And the clients that we have are involved, educated. They ask great questions. They want to know about their money. The other thing is they come to us. Don't fear a financial advisor. There's a lot of things there's a lot of bad press out there about financial advisors. It's not all true. But if the relationship resonates with you and you can trust the financial advisor, go to them. They are going to add value in your life. They are going to protect you from yourself and poor sort of investor behavior. So I would advocate that everybody at least meets with a financial advisor or a few, just to see what they don't know. We live in such a complex world that you cannot be a professional in every area of your life. So just as much as you would consult with your doctor, consult with a financial advisor, because the financial pillar of your life needs to be as strong as your health pillar.
And as soon as you get a job, start. I mean, is there a percentage of your salary that you should put aside? What sort of duration are you looking at? Or does that obviously depend on each and every person?
So how long's a piece of string? But kind of rule of thumb, from the minute you start earning, save 10% of your after-tax money. It'll put you in good stead, and don't touch it. Yeah. That's the other thing. The power of compounding is not a myth. It is a real thing, and it happens. Don't touch it. And obviously the first place to start is your tax-free saving account. Okay. By the very nature, it's tax-free. Go there. It
is what it says it is.
It says what it says on the tin, tax-free saving account. It's a discipline, it's a process of discipline, and it's boring. But just do it. Debit orders are your friend. Leave things to rote. I'm very much make things a process. Just let it happen in the background. You've got too much going on to remember to do everything that you need to do. So just start as soon as you can, and don't touch it.
Let's go back to diversity in the workplace. And so we've sorted out the finances now. The final question was, why is it not working?
I think we touched on that. It's not working because diversity is not inclusion. I think that leaders don't really believe it. They're ticking boxes on some ESG scale. If your top notch, fish rots from the head. If your top leaders are not believing it, your second and third tier management is not believing it. People don't believe in their blind spots. They think it's kind of nonsense. It's not part of your performance review. It's something we do as well. It's not well explained, and so it fails. And I think that the mindset is just not there in the businesses.
There'll be no pay parity either, will there, until we sort that out.
And there'll be no pay parity. So actually the pay parity is the easiest thing to fix. That can happen. You can go to the accountant.
Do it immediately.
It's the inclusion, and we spoke about that keeps people separate. So we can all be in the same room, but we're not together.
The World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap report said it'll still be 170 years until women achieve economic parity on a global scale. I mean, we've even got cryogenics, but it's not going to work, is it, if we've got to wait that long?
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate part of it, is that these things take time. So we've had gender inequality for the past 170 years. And if you think about how far we are away from women and the vote, women and the pill, we're still fighting for abortion rights. We're a million miles away from equality.
But at the end of the day, if you bring women on, if you bring them onto the boards, your company should perform better.
You will increase innovation, you will increase productivity, you will increase inclusivity in your workplace. You'll definitely have a happier workforce, and happier people work harder. The bottom line grows.
Thanks very much for that, Candice Paine. Clearly a lot of work still needs to be done. And I'll see you again next week. Remember to send me your business money concerns at jane@biznews.com. See you then.